fire of war. Despite the betrayal of certain generals, the Loyal Legion remained steadfast in their allegiance to Ruda, their unwavering loyalty bolstered by years of indoctrination and conditioning. Comprised of battle-hardened soldiers hardened by years of conflict, these troops represented the last line of defense for Ruda and the guerrillist regime. In the sprawling war-torn landscape of guerrillists, this force, now numbering approximately 20,000 soldiers, stood as a formidable obstacle against the advancing forces of the resistance. These soldiers, veterans of countless battles, possessed a level of combat prowess and tactical proficiency that far surpassed that of the resistance fighters. They had been forged in the fires of war, their resolve unyielding, their loyalty unshakable. Within the fortified walls of the guerrillist capital, Hunxi, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The echoes of the rebellion resounded through the city as Kodo's resistance forces closed in, inching ever closer to the final stronghold of Ruda's regime. The Loyal Legion, now assembled in defensive formations around the palace and key strategic points in the city, prepared for the impending battle with a grim determination. They knew that the fight ahead would be their most crucial, and potentially their last. For Kodo, the leader of the resistance, the challenge posed by Ruda's loyalist soldiers was not to be underestimated. Unlike the civilian volunteers and former soldiers who made up the bulk of the resistance forces, Ruda's soldiers were seasoned warriors with years of experience on the battlefield. Their disciplined ranks and unwavering resolve presented a formidable obstacle to the resistance's efforts to overthrow Ruda's regime. Yet, Kodo had anticipated the strength of Ruda's loyalist soldiers and had formulated a meticulously crafted plan to overcome this formidable opposition. Drawing on his extensive knowledge of military strategy and tactics, Kodo had devised a series of precise maneuvers designed to exploit the weaknesses within Ruda's forces and turn the tide of battle in favor of the resistance. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the stage was set for the climactic confrontation. The city of Hunxi, once a bustling metropolis and the heart of guerrillists' power, now stood as a battleground where the fate of the nation would be decided. The streets, once filled with the hum of daily life, were now silent, save for the distant sounds of marching boots and the metallic clank of weapons being readied for battle. Kodo's plan was simple in its elegance yet complex in its execution. Knowing that a direct assault on the Loyal Legion would lead to a costly and potentially devastating confrontation, Kodo opted for a strategy that combined diversion, subterfuge, and targeted strikes. The resistance forces, under Kodo's direction, would engage in a series of feigned attacks and guerrilla-style raids, designed to stretch the loyalist forces thin and create openings in their defenses. The first phase of the plan involved drawing the Loyal Legion out of their fortified positions. Kodo's forces, using small, highly mobile units, launched a series of hit-and-run attacks on the outskirts of the city, targeting supply lines and communication hubs critical to the Loyalists' operations. These skirmishes, while seemingly minor, forced the Loyal Legion to respond, pulling troops away from the heavily fortified palace and spreading their forces across the city. Simultaneously, Kodo's intelligence network worked tirelessly to sow discord within the ranks of the Loyalists. Messages were intercepted and altered, false orders were issued, and key Loyalist commanders were targeted for assassination or capture. These efforts aimed to disrupt the chain of command and create confusion among the Loyalist forces, further weakening their ability to mount a coordinated defense. As the Loyal Legion scrambled to deal with the escalating series of attacks, the resistance launched the second phase of their plan. Kodo's forces, having identified weak points in the Loyalists' defenses, began a series of concentrated assaults on key strategic locations within the city. These strikes, executed with precision and speed, aimed to seize control of critical infrastructure and cut off the Loyalists' ability to regroup or call for reinforcements. The Loyal Legion, despite their experience and training, found themselves caught off guard by the ferocity and coordination of the Resistance's attacks. As the battle raged on, the Loyalists were forced to retreat, pulling back to the palace, their final stronghold. But even as they regrouped, the Resistance continued to press the attack, using their superior numbers and strategic advantages to wear down the Loyalist defenses. The roar of retribution. The once tranquil streets of the capital city of Hunxi had been transformed into a gruesome battlefield, bearing witness to the horrors of war. Where once the sounds of everyday life echoed through its streets, now there was only the deafening cacophony of violence and destruction. The blood-soaked roads bore testament to the relentless conflict that had engulfed the city, with lifeless bodies, both of soldiers and innocent civilians, strewn across the landscape. The crimson hue of fresh blood painted a macabre tableau, casting a grim pall over the once vibrant city. The destruction was overwhelming. The brutal clashes between Ruda's loyalist forces and the resistance fighters. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of death, the cries of the wounded and dying mingling with the roar of gunfire and the clash of steel. Hunxi, once the proud capital of Guerrillist, had become a graveyard of shattered dreams and lost hopes, a city caught in the grip of a war that showed no mercy. In the midst of this chaos, an unexpected turn of events unfolded, heralded by a signal from Kodo, the leader of the resistance. As the dust settled from the most recent skirmishes, the defenders of Hunxi braced themselves for the inevitable second wave of attacks from the resistance forces. But instead of the familiar sight of resistance fighters emerging from the shadows, a formidable force descended upon the city, tens of thousands of bears and lions, warriors hailing from the distant lands of Birais and Leoniais. These fierce and powerful creatures, renowned for their strength and ferocity in battle, had covertly infiltrated the capital, awaiting Kodo's signal to unleash their might upon the enemy. The warriors of Birais and Leoniais, their muscular frames glistening with sweat and blood, moved with a predatory grace through the war-torn streets, their eyes gleaming with a cold, calculated determination. Their arrival was a game-changer, a dramatic escalation in the conflict that sent shockwaves through the ranks of Ruda's loyalists. As the bears and lions prowled the streets of Hunxi, a palpable air of vengeance hung heavy in the atmosphere. For these warriors, their march into battle was more than just a military campaign, it was a quest for retribution. Birais and Leoniais had both suffered greatly under the oppressive rule of Ruda, their lands ravaged and their people subjugated by the guerrillist regime. Now, their warriors had come to seek justice for the atrocities committed against their nations. Fueled by a deep-seated sense of loyalty and patriotism, they were determined to avenge the wrongs inflicted upon their homelands. The bears and lions, armed with an array of formidable weapons and battle-hardened through years of conflict, tore through the remaining loyalist forces with a ferocity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Their roars echoed through the streets, a fearsome sound that struck terror into the hearts of Ruda's soldiers. With each swing of their massive paws and each strike of their claws, they left a trail of destruction in their wake, their enemies falling before them like wheat before the scythe. But these warriors were more than just instruments of vengeance, they were heroes, destined to be immortalized in the annals of their country's history. Their bravery and sacrifice would be celebrated for generations to come, their names revered by future generations as symbols of courage and resilience in the face of tyranny. And as they marched through the streets of Hunxi, their presence served as a beacon of hope for the oppressed and downtrodden, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the spirit of freedom and justice could never be extinguished. For Kodo, the arrival of these warriors marked a pivotal moment in his quest to overthrow Ruda's oppressive regime. Standing atop a hastily constructed platform, Kodo addressed the assembled warriors and his resistance fighters, his voice ringing out over the din of battle. Warriors of Birais and Leoniais, Kodo began, his tone both solemn and commanding, "You have traveled far and fought valiantly to stand here today, in the heart of our enemy's power. Your courage and strength have struck fear into the hearts of those who sought to oppress and subjugate us. But our fight is not yet over." Kodo's eyes swept over the crowd, taking in the determined faces of the warriors and the hopeful gazes of his followers. "Today, we do not fight just for revenge," he continued, his voice rising with fervor. "We fight for something greater, justice for those who have suffered, freedom for those who have been shackled, and a future where no ruler can ever again wield power through fear and oppression." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a thunderous roar that echoed through the streets of Hunxi. Kodo raised his hand for silence, and the noise gradually subsided. "Ruda's reign ends today," Kodo declared, his voice filled with conviction. "But we must remain vigilant. The forces of tyranny are resilient, and they will not fall easily. We must strike with precision, with unity, and with the full force of our righteous anger. Together, we will bring an end to this dark chapter in our history, and we will build a new future, one founded on the principles of freedom, justice, and compassion. As Kodo spoke, his words resonated deeply with the warriors and the resistance fighters alike. He had become more than just a leader. He was the embodiment of their collective will, the symbol of their struggle against oppression. With Kodo at the helm, they felt invincible, ready to take on any challenge that lay ahead. As the final preparations for the assault on the palace were made, Kodo descended from the platform, his mind focused on the task at hand. The capital was within their grasp, and with it, the power to reshape the future of Gorilist and the entire continent. But Kodo knew that the coming hours would be the most dangerous, the most critical of their campaign. Failure was not an option. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the war-torn city. The time had come for the final push, the decisive battle that would determine the fate of Gorilist. The bears and lions, now fully integrated with the resistance forces, took their positions, ready to storm the palace and bring an end to Ruta's reign of terror. As darkness fell over Hunxi, the city braced itself for the final confrontation. The warriors of Birais and Leoniais, their hearts burning with the fire of vengeance, stood ready to unleash their fury upon the last remnants of Ruta's loyalists. The stage was set for the culmination of Kodo's meticulously crafted plan, a plan that would either lead to the dawn of a new era or plunge the continent back into the abyss of tyranny. In the heart of the capital, within the palace walls, Ruta prepared for the final stand. Surrounded by the last of his loyal soldiers, he steeled himself for the inevitable clash, his mind racing with thoughts of victory and defeat. The roars of the approaching warriors echoed in his ears, a chilling reminder of the force that now stood against him. And so, with the city of Hunxi as their battleground, the forces of freedom and tyranny prepared to collide in a conflict that would echo through the ages, a war for the soul of Gorilist, fought not just with weapons, but with ideals and beliefs that would shape the future of a continent. The thunder of liberation. The battleground reverberated with the cacophony of war, the clash of swords, the thundering of hooves, and the triumphant cheers of the resistance fighters. Amidst the chaos and turmoil, the unexpected entry of Birais and Leoniais onto the stage of conflict altered the course of the war in ways unforeseen by both sides. The Gorilist army, once the formidable arm of Ruta's authoritarian regime, now found itself thrust into disarray and confusion. The sudden appearance of forces from distant lands, Birais and Leoniais, struck like a thunderbolt, encircling the Gorilist soldiers from all sides. The bewildered troops of Gorilist, who had long been accustomed to their dominance on the battlefield, now faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. As the roar of battle echoed through the war-torn cityscape of Hunxi, the coalition of Birais and Leoniais unleashed a relentless assault upon the Gorilist forces. For these warriors, the fight was not merely a clash of arms, but a reckoning, a chance to repay the debt of oppression and suffering inflicted upon their people by Ruta's tyrannical rule. With steely determination, they coordinated their attacks, driving forward with a ferocity born of years of pent-up resentment and defiance. The warriors of Birais, with their muscular frames and unparalleled strength, charged through the Gorilist ranks like a force of nature, their battle cries echoing off the walls of the beleaguered city. Side by side with them, the lions of Leoniais, swift and fierce, tore through enemy lines with deadly precision. Their claws and fangs were as sharp as their resolve, their coordinated strikes leaving no room for the Gorilist forces to regroup or counterattack. The resistance fighters from Birais and Leoniais, once silenced and oppressed under Ruta's iron grip, now emerged as a potent force of change. With each step forward, they reclaimed their dignity and their freedom, striking blow after blow against the forces of tyranny and oppression. Swift and relentless, they pressed the advantage, overwhelming the disoriented Gorilist army with their sheer determination and resolve. Caught off guard by the ferocity of the coalition's assault, the Gorilist troops found themselves outnumbered and outmatched. What had once been a formidable force now dwindled to a mere fraction of its former strength, as wave after wave of Birais and Leoniais warriors crashed upon their ranks. The sound of clashing steel and the cries of the wounded filled the air as the tide of battle turned against Ruta's forces. Faced with the harsh reality of their situation, the guerrillist soldiers fought on with grim determination, their backs against the wall as they desperately sought to hold the line against the relentless onslaught. But despite their bravery and their resolve, the guerrillist army could not withstand the overwhelming tide of the coalition's advance. Their formations crumbled under the pressure, their morale shattered by the unrelenting fury of their adversaries. Slowly but surely, the guerrillist forces were pushed back, forced to retreat to the heart of the capital city of Hunxi in a desperate bid to regroup and defend their last stronghold. The once proud and unyielding Ruda dynasty now teetered on the brink of collapse, its grip on power slipping away with each passing moment. The streets of Hunxi, once the seat of Ruda's power, now echoed with the footsteps of the advancing coalition, their arrival heralding the imminent fall of a tyrant. For the resistance fighters and their allies from Birais and Leoniais, victory was within reach, a victory not just over the forces of guerrillists, but over the tyranny and oppression that had held their people in chains for so long. As they pressed forward, their spirits soared with the knowledge that liberation was at hand and that the dawn of a new era was upon them. The streets of Hunxi, once darkened by the shadow of Ruda's rule, now gleamed with the promise of freedom. The coalition's forces, inspired by the prospect of victory and driven by the memory of their own people's suffering, fought with a fervor that Ruda's loyalists could not match. Their banners fluttered proudly in the wind, symbols of the unity and determination that had brought them together in this moment of reckoning. The people of Birais and Leoniais, who had endured so much under Ruda's regime, now saw their warriors rise as heroes. As they fought on, they knew that they fought not just for themselves, but for all those who had suffered under the yoke of Ruda's rule, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Each blow struck, each inch of ground gained, was a step closer to a future free from the chains of oppression. The coalition's march through Hunxi was not just a military victory, it was a symbol of hope, a beacon of light piercing through the darkness that had long enveloped the continent. With every corner turned, the coalition forces encountered scenes of destruction and despair, the remnants of Ruda's reign. But amidst the ruins, they also found signs of resistance, of a people who had never truly surrendered to tyranny. The citizens of Hunxi, emboldened by the presence of the coalition warriors, began to emerge from their hiding places, joining the fight in whatever way they could. Their defiance, long suppressed, now found an outlet in the final push to overthrow the tyrant who had brought so much misery to their land. As the coalition forces closed in on the palace, the heart of Ruda's power, they knew that the end was near. The once mighty guerrillist army, now a mere shadow of its former self, could not withstand the combined might of the resistance and its allies. The walls of the palace, which had stood as symbols of Ruda's unassailable authority, now trembled under the weight of the approaching forces. In the final hours of the battle for Hunxi, the coalition warriors fought with the knowledge that their struggle was not just for themselves, but for the generations to come. They fought to ensure that the horrors of Ruda's reign would never be repeated, that the sacrifices made in the name of freedom would not be in vain. The streets of Hunxi, once stained with the blood of the innocent, would soon be cleansed by the courage and determination of those who refused to bow to tyranny. The fall of the guerrillist regime was imminent, and with it, the dawn of a new era of peace and justice for all the peoples of the continent. Trapped in the maelstrom, the once mighty guerrillist army found itself ensnared in the clutches of a dire and harrowing predicament, trapped within the crucible of an unforgiving battlefield. 6 legions, entangled in a protracted border conflict with the forces of Tajera and Wolfia, struggled to navigate a treacherous landscape fraught with indecision and uncertainty. The once vibrant borderlands, teeming with life and vitality, now bore the scars of a merciless and prolonged engagement. The earth was soaked with the blood of fallen soldiers, and the echoes of their anguished cries haunted the air, hanging like a specter over the broken land. For the guerrillist soldiers caught in this maelstrom of violence and chaos, each passing moment brought with it a mounting sense of despair and hopelessness. Cut off from reinforcements, surrounded by an enemy that seemed to press in on all sides, they found themselves locked in a grim battle for survival. Their once unwavering resolve was now tested to its very limits, as they struggled to hold the line against a relentless foe. Tajera and Wolfia, with their coordinated tactics and unyielding determination, had forced the guerrillist army into a precarious position. The enemy's strategy was clear: isolate the guerrillist legions, prevent them from retreating or advancing, and gradually wear them down through a war of attrition. The borderlands, which had once been seen as a strategic buffer, had now become a death trap, hemming in the guerrillist forces with no escape in sight. Every attempt by the guerrillist commanders to break through the enemy lines was met with fierce resistance. Each time they tried to advance, Tajera and Wolfia's forces would counter with devastating precision, pushing them back to their starting positions. And yet, retreat was not an option either. To fall back would be to surrender the borderlands entirely and expose the heart of guerrillas to invasion, a prospect that sent chills down the spine of every soldier who fought under Ruta's banner. As days turned into weeks, the once organized guerrillist legions began to fray at the edges. Morale plummeted as supplies dwindled, and the constant barrage of attacks took its toll. Soldiers who had once marched with pride and purpose now moved with the weary gait of the defeated. The commanders, too, found themselves at a loss, their strategies unraveling in the face of an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Back in the heart of the capital city, Hunxi, a fierce and relentless confrontation unfolded between the resolute resistance fighters and the beleaguered remnants of the guerrillist army. With each passing hour, the resistance, driven by an unyielding patriotism and a burning desire for freedom, pressed forward with unwavering determination. The streets of Hunxi, once bustling with the vibrant energy of everyday life, now bore witness to the grim spectacle of war. Buildings lay in ruins, their shattered facades serving as stark reminders of the devastation wrought by the conflict. Smoke billowed into the sky, mingling with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the stench of death, casting a pall of darkness over the besieged city. As the resistance fighters closed in on their adversaries, the guerrillist soldiers stationed in the capital found themselves facing an existential crisis. Their ranks were decimated, their spirits shattered. Reduced to a mere fraction of their former strength, with only 5,000 soldiers remaining, they stood on the brink of annihilation. The once proud army that had dominated the continent now lay broken and defeated, a shadow of its former self. Abandoned and isolated, with no hope of reinforcements and no reprieve from the relentless onslaught of the resistance, the guerrillist soldiers grappled with the grim reality of their situation. Their situation mirrored that of their comrades trapped in the borderlands, cut off, surrounded, and slowly being ground down by a determined and resourceful enemy. In the face of overwhelming adversity, with defeat looming on the horizon, the guerrillist soldiers found themselves confronted with a stark choice. Surrender and face the consequences of their actions, or fight to the bitter end and risk being consumed by the flames of war. Among the ranks, fear and uncertainty spread like wildfire, sowing discord where once there had been unity. But the decision was not an easy one. To surrender would mean admitting defeat, abandoning the cause they had sworn to defend, and placing their fate in the hands of those they had once fought against. For many, the thought of laying down their arms was unthinkable. They had fought too long, sacrificed too much, to give up now. And yet, the alternative, continuing to fight against insurmountable odds, seemed equally bleak. In the dim light of the makeshift barracks that now served as their final stronghold, the soldiers huddled together, their faces etched with worry and doubt. Conversations were hushed, the usual banter replaced by grim discussions of what the future might hold. Some spoke of honor, of the duty to fight to the last man, while others, weary from the long months of battle, wondered aloud if there might be another way. Some way to end the bloodshed without sacrificing their dignity or their lives. But even as the soldiers wrestled with their dilemma, the battle raged on. In the borderlands, the legions of Tajera and Wolfia continued their slow, inexorable advance, tightening the noose around the trapped guerrillist forces. In Hunxi, the resistance fighters pressed their attack, determined to break through the final lines of defense and bring an end to Ruta's reign of terror. The guerrillist soldiers were caught in a vice, unable to advance, unable to retreat. Every path seemed to lead to ruin, and the weight of their choices bore down on them with crushing force. Their once mighty army, which had struck fear into the hearts of their enemies, now stood on the brink of collapse, its fate hanging by a thread. In the end, it was not just the strength of their enemies that brought the guerrillist army to its knees, but the very weight of the decisions they were forced to make. The battlefield had become a crucible, a place where the resolve of even the most hardened soldiers was tested and found wanting. As the sun set on another day of bloodshed and strife, the soldiers of the guerrillist army faced an uncertain future, their fate tied to the outcome of a battle they were no longer sure they could win.